Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of the Disruptive Innovators Network DINCast, and focusing on people and culture. And I'm joined by Richard Fairley. Richard's going to introduce himself in a moment, but just let me tell you a little bit about today's edition. So today's edition is about looking at a great example of both agility in resourcing and collaboration in practice. And I know we talk about agile resourcing quite a lot, and I know we talk about collaboration in the sector a lot, but it's actually quite hard to make that happen. So this is a great example of both of those things actually in practice. So great opportunity there to bring Richard in, who is the example of all of this. And Richard, do you want to just kick off by sort of telling us what is it you actually do and for who?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Helena. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, so I believe it's the first of its kind, certainly in Scotland, in terms of a shared service for HR or for people and culture across three housing associations. So it's three kind of smaller housing associations, circa kind of between 30 and 40 employees each.
Yeah.
Who otherwise wouldn't have probably been able to afford what we refer to as next level HR, strategic HR post. And I've split my time between the three organisations. So we're 6 months in, 7 months in. So far, so good. Across a kind of 2-year contract. It's almost like a trial run to see how this goes for myself and for the association. So, yeah, it's quite unique, but really quite interesting as well.
And I think that sort of let's test it and see how it goes is a great approach. That rather than we've committed long term, but that sort of test and adjust, and 2 years is a good is a good time to see if it works. And across three as well is is quite a challenge. So what does a day-to-day actually look like in your unique role?
Yeah, I think when the idea was first kind of proposed, it took a bit of time to try and determine how this was going to work, because straight away, if you think of a stereotypical HR role, it's a reactive role. It's a reactive kind of industry, isn't it? HR, where and really the level that I'm operating at and want to operate in these organisations want to operate at is strategic, which is a lot more proactive. So what I do is I split my time across the three organisations across 4 days. So 2 days a week at Cloch Housing Association, who are based in Greenock, 1 day a week at Barrhead Housing Association, and 1 day at Dalmuir Park Housing Association as well. So between the three, I try and do my time over 4 days, sorry, and then I use another day, which happens to be a Monday, where I'll just kind of prepare and plan my week, because I'm juggling the three all the time. So that's essentially my day to day, but there's a high degree of flexibility built in amongst it. That was the agreement from the get-go, Helena, that if something comes up, such as maybe a grievance, I mean, I want to be working on the proactive strategic, but it's still me that sits with. So if a grievance comes in disciplinary and I'm not due to be on site at that particular location for 6 days, we can't wait that long. We need to kind of move on quickly. So a day-to-day is juggling.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And I get you said actually about you on site. So you generally actually on site when you go to those
I
organisations.
like to be on site. I've got the option to work from home, but there's the real reason behind that, Helena, is so that I can build those relationships. It's a brand new role.
Yeah.
So they've never had, all three organisations have never had a dedicated HR resource. So it's new for not just myself and the leaders, but the overall organisation, the people on the ground who are trying to understand what my role is and how it operates. So that's key for me. I actually sit right in amongst everyone, the heart of the operation, so I can hear and just get a feel for the culture and feel for the dynamics of each workplace.
Yeah, interesting. And how did it all come about, Richard? What was the spark behind making this a thing?
Yeah, I was actually working in consultancy, so HR consultancy, and I was working with Cloch, who are one of the partners. I was doing a bit of work with them for about 12 months before, but it was Alana Durnan, the chief executive at Cloch, who's the real kind of brainchild behind this. Alana is quite creative and innovative, and has done a shared service in finance before. So she did kind of pitch the idea to me. And I must say I had some reservations given that it was the first of its kind, and I'm thinking, God, how's this going to work? But it's actually been pretty seamless for me because I was in consultancy where you're juggling 4 or 5 clients at a time.
Yeah.
And then, and I'm now moving in. But I must say, I think, it come about from Alana went around speaking to some of her peers in the sector, and she was very, very good at picking the right partners. That was the key to it all. You've got to work with partners that are completely aligned with what you're doing. And in Barrhead and in Dalmuir Park, I had some really authentic, honest conversations with the two chief executives there to say, look, this is what I can bring. What is it you're looking for? And it just aligned. It fell into place the right time, I would say. So yeah, it took several weeks and months to get it pulled together, but yeah.
Yeah. And you probably answered a bit of this. One of the things I was going to ask you about was, collaboration like this just doesn't happen by chance, particularly with 3 partners. I mean, two's quite a challenge, but, adding in a third. So those foundations that you needed to be in place for this to work. Is there anything you'd add to that, Richard?
Yeah, I think, look, some of my ideas and with regards to people and culture, I would argue are probably quite bold, quite forward thinking and innovative for the sector. Not that I'm coming up with anything too drastic, but I think if I look at the sector, we're a little bit stuck, and certainly with people and culture up here in Scotland and their housing associations, in my opinion. So what I did, what the foundation really was built upon is being open and receptive to new ways of working, new ways of doing things. That was key for me in selecting the right partners, because if I'm going to be coming in and ripping up processes and changing things, I need that leadership buy-in for that. And same vice versa. I think there needed to be that understanding from my perspective that the 3 organisations, although they're aligned in what they're looking to do, there's 3 separate identities, 3 separate organisations with 3 different set of strategic objectives. So I need to adapt to that as well. So it's been bold, confident, changing things, but that trust in the post holder, trust in me was probably a real fundamental, which I'm very grateful for, most definitely.
Brilliant. And there must be some specific advantages to having this type of resourcing model. This, it's a pretty bold alternative model to traditional working, because you've got, you're experiencing 3 cultures all at the same time. You've got your own experience from before. What advantages do you think specifically this brings?
I think I maybe referenced it at the start there, Helena, that we often refer to it as next level HR, which is operating at that slightly higher level. So if you compare it to, let's say, for example, if you were to, or any of the 3 organisations were to bring in a HR advisor, a HR advisor would be bogged down in the day-to-day, your absence cases, your disciplinary grievance. Although I'm involved in that, I don't tend to take too much to do with it. I'm looking at the bigger picture and to try and change. Now, the 3 organisations would never have been able to afford, in terms of resource. It's a full time me and what I do and what I can bring. But they might have been able to do that with a HR advisor, somebody at a different level. So that's what they had to weigh up, I guess, was to say, right, do you want a HR advisor who comes in and just looks after that side, or do you want somebody to come in and change things, and to move things forward and try and develop our culture, our employee value proposition, all these exciting things that excite me. So that's the key difference, I think. So for me, it is a big advantage that they've decided to opt for this, because they'll see changes across these 2 years that they wouldn't have otherwise if they had opted for maybe an advisor or an administrative HR post.
Yeah. And you say 6 months, you're 6 months in. And has anything surprised you so far? Have been any unexpected challenges, or particularly things that have gone particularly well, or not gone so well? How's it going?
Yeah, there has been a few surprises. There's certainly been challenges. There's always going to be, I think, with this sort of thing, because it's new, it's very different. So for me, I think I'm saying, it's pretty seamless for me in stepping into this role. However, I've had to improve upon my communication skills, my level of emotional intelligence, how I go about that, my time management. Is the first 3 months, I'm like, right, how am I going to do all this together? I need more time. But I think, I think to put a positive spin on that, I must say that in terms of real surprises, I've been taken aback with how well received it's been by the overall staff, the overall people on the ground, because again, as I alluded to earlier, you've got a HR post that's never existed before. And when I'm coming in, there was absolute, I know there was, there was murmurings going, why is he here?
Yeah.
What's he up to?
Yeah.
So I worked really hard at that, Helena. I worked really hard at building positive relationships with people across all different levels of the organisation. And as I say, I sat right in the middle, the heart of the operation, to really try and break down those barriers. Because through those relationships, you're building trust, and through trust, you're gaining that credibility as well. So that has taken me by surprise. But it's making sure that I do, even, we're talking earlier, I think about going and involving myself in the social events and making sure, because that's how people get that trust, and that's how they then come and speak to you and open up, and that's how you learn about the culture and any potential issues. So that has been a big surprise, but a pleasant one.
I love that, Richard, that you get to invite to 3 Christmas parties. That's
I do. It's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Vicar of Dibley's Christmas lunch, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And so, working across 3 distinct cultures, what's that like? Because obviously most of us, when we're in house, we get very steeped into an individual culture. So, how do you spot those moments where, there could be shared learning across and cross-pollination across those 3 organizations? So yeah, 3 cultures is quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think it definitely is. And there's a misconception, because I think a lot of people from the outside think that, right, okay, the 3 organisations must be aligned. We are. We've got a common set of objectives, and some of our values are very similar. So, each day on site must be the same. But no, it's completely different. But I'm glad it is. That's the full point.
Yeah.
It's trying to retain your own cultural identity whilst sharing good practice, sharing some policies, sharing some of the kind of creative things that we're doing in terms of practice. So yeah, I do. I think so. One of the first things I did when I went in was conduct a cultural audit, or what I called a people and culture audit of each organisation, just to understand where they are. So pulling focus groups together, trying to understand what's going on, what how each organisation operates, and the results of that were really interesting, because you have somewhere like Barrhead where they're very, very technology focused, innovative, built solely upon trust. That looks very different to Cloch and Dalmuir Park, who've got their own culture, based around well-being, or based around developing young people in particular at Cloch. So straight away you've got differences, but there's learnings from each other. And we've done things such as menopause training together, pull everyone together, all the managers, leadership team, and split the cost. Really simple, really effective, but really effective, because we've all got that common interest in that particular topic, and it all plays in and feeds into the overall health and wellbeing strategies that are being created across the 3. So there's one example, but it is also pulling from, Barrhead do their team meetings very well in terms of engagement, collaboration, and me taking that and saying, right, we need to do a bit more of that over at Cloch, over at Dalmuir Park. So yeah, it's been very good in that respect. But that's maybe where I come in, trying to identify those gaps.
So having your eyes on all 3, you can kind of bring together some of the best practice, and I guess some of the colleagues in that as well. That's brilliant, a great example. And is there anything you'd pull out, as I would say, it is relatively early days, Richard, so sorry to put you on the spot. What's landed really well. Is there anything that you'd be particularly thinking, in reflecting on those 6 months that's gone particularly well?
Yes, I mean, I could probably identify a few highlights from each organisation quite easily from a high performance policy at Barrhead, which is quite a radical thing to introduce in for a housing association, or to some of the wellbeing strategy work that's been going on elsewhere. However, collectively, what I was really keen to do, and we agreed this from day one, was that I wanted to roll out a managerial upskilling programme across the three organisations. So making sure that the managers are not only receiving kind of training and that organisational development piece around your typical absence, performance, the grievance to handling these, but a lot of the softer skills as well, holding difficult conversations, retraining our managers as coaches, all that kind of work as well. I was really keen to do across an 18-month to 24-month period. So we're well underway with that at all three organisations, and it's landed well, I think, so far. All at different stages in terms of their learning, but it has, because that's again how I've kind of built those relationships with the managers and developing them quite quickly as well,
Yeah.
and gaining that level of consistency. It's one thing that we always talk about in HR, is getting a consistent approach when it comes to managers and their decision making, and that is enabled or certainly kicked things off in that respect. So that for me has been a real win so far. It's something that we plan to continue delivering over the next 18 months.
And I guess that's possibly brought with it some cost savings as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's been
Brilliant.
great.
And what would you say to others thinking about doing something similar? Is there any advice or things to look out for others considering moving forward in this way?
Yeah, I think I'll be honest, and I've spoke at a couple of conferences recently, and I've been quite forthcoming and forthright with my view on this, is that the sector is absolutely ready for innovation like this. Even when you introduced me there, Helen, that was going through my head, is that why aren't we doing more of this? Just to me, we're all aware in the sector of the challenges we face in terms of cost and affordability. So here is a perfect example of how we can do something it's outside the box a little. Again, there will be challenges, but why aren't we doing it across the likes of finance, doing it across IT? We're not doing enough in the sector in terms of people and culture. The stats tell us that we've got, an ageing workforce, when young people are not opting for a career in social housing, because, not to blame the young people, it's because we're not doing enough to attract them. Our employee value propositions are nowhere near ambitious enough for young people. So I think, to answer your question, is that it's all about getting the right partners, of course. It's all about finding common ground in terms of where you are, where you're looking to go as organisations. But my advice would certainly be for any organisation that doesn't need to be in that people and culture space. As I say, look at IT and artificial intelligence, and we're going down that route. It'd be a concern as to how we can afford this as an organisation. But let's look at potentially working with others and having that shared service and shared resource. Because so far I think we're proving that it can be a success, certainly in my role.
Brilliant. Well, if it's good news, because at the DIN CEO conference, there was a lot of appetite for more collaboration. I think it is that trick of turning it into something else. And I was talking to a HA last week who are looking at it in the people space as well. So hopefully we will see more of it. I just want to wrap up by asking you a really unfair question here. So just a bit of an off the cuff question for you. If you had a really creative job title that perhaps truly captured what you're doing, and kind of all that energy that you put behind it, Richard, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you're asking that, because I'll sometimes see on LinkedIn and places, some of the funny titles that do actually exist, and you're thinking, God, I quite like that. And you also get the titles that are taking the mickey out of HR in terms of being like a chief complaints listener or something like that, where you're just getting people coming. No, I think Yeah, I'm not the most creative with things like that. I think something like a culture curator or a workplace wizard or something like that. That would be.
I'm liking that. That works.
Yeah, I'm going to get pelters for that. That's terrible.
Uh, Richard, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing all of that. I think it will be really useful for a number of our members that are thinking of it, and I'm sure that you'll get people reaching out to ask you more about it at some point.
That'd be great.
So,
Yeah, welcome that. No, thanks very much for your time, Elaine. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.